we look at something called CSS in Pick Computer Science video number 20. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. What are they? What can we say about them? A cascading style sheet uses something called a style sheet language. This is used for describing the look and formatting of a document written in a markup language such as HTML. So it's all about providing formatting and style to text, images, hyperlinks, tables, boxes, whatever it is that's on your web pages. CSS can be part of a HTML document, so the code that is written in this style sheet language in cascading style sheets can be embedded within a HTML document, or more likely and probably more effectively stored as a separate file and then linked to the HTML document. CSS allows for consistent and efficient design, so it's all about not having to rewrite formatting for multiple elements that might all need to look the same. So it allows for consistency, because if we just got to write a format once and apply it to lots of objects, then we're not going to make a mistake, or we're not going to be inconsistent by writing that format lots of times, and doing that means we're going to be efficient as well. It also allows for the appropriate layout of the same content on different devices. So we might have some content in our web page that we want to display in a particular way for a computer's web browser. The same content we might want to look a different way on a smartphone web browser, for obvious reasons, that a screen on a smartphone is likely to be smaller and the user uses a smartphone in a different way than they do a PC. We'd want the content to look and appear differently even more on an accessibility enabled web browser. So the sort of web browser where people might have visual or even hearing impairments, so might have very contrasting colours, maybe yellow text on black backgrounds, etc., and screen readers for people with hearing problems. So that content needs to appear differently still. If all of that sounds a little confusing for now, we'll try and explain it in more simplistic terms. Imagine you have a website with tens, hundreds of different web pages within the website, but you might want them to all look and appear the same, so to have the same house style, same fonts, same colours, same backgrounds, etc. If you wanted to update your style, change, say, a background colour or a font that is used throughout your website, then it would be a big task to go in and edit fonts, colours, etc. on every single web page. It might mean going into the HTML on every single web page and maybe updating properties of tags such as the font tag, and that will be a large, long, laborious job. What we'd want to do, ideally, is update our formatting in one file and have those changes applied to all files. And that's what's shown in this diagram. On the left hand side we've got an example of some CSS, cascading style sheet code, and if we were to change it in this one file, then anywhere that uses the H1 tag in our other web pages that link to this CSS file would automatically change. As with all of these web languages, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, there are places like w3schools.com on the web where you can come and try out some CSS. So here there are two panes. On the left hand side we've got our normal sort of HTML. This is our content, and this bit of text uses the H1 tag. But it won't just be any old normal H1 tag. If we look a bit further up, embedded in the head tag, which is where hidden things go in HTML, the style tag is used to contain some CSS. and the H1 tag is styled as having color orange and text aligned as center. Therefore, that's what's shown over on the right hand side. And the paragraph tag used here is styled as Times New Roman, font size 20 pixels. Now, we could try and change some of that. It's not necessarily going to make a massive difference. It's only going to change one element, because the H1 tag is only used once over on the right hand side here, but we should be able to see that change happening. If there was more pieces of text in this HTML document that used the H1 tag, and I'd changed the H1 style, then we'd see that change happening multiple times over on this pane. And some web pages do have the CSS embedded within their head tag using the style tag, like this example shows, but more often than not, and for much better reasons, CSS is stored in an external file. What I wanted to show this for was really just to show how this trend of separating out content from formatting is a real way forward. Your data should always be very separate from your styles, or your content should be as separate as possible from your formatting, however you want to term it. That's just good practice. It just means that you can apply new styles to content in the most efficient way. To show how a external file can be used to store CSS, I've got a folder here with two HTML documents, two web pages in there, and some images to go on those web pages. The web pages look very alike at the moment, but we've got slightly different data in. There's one and there is the other. Different pictures, different text, but look the same. And the HTML within those is going to be very, very similar. So what we're going to do is we're going to link both files up to a single CSS file and start to show how that single CSS file can control the appearance of both pages. Now, the first job that I have is in a fresh notepad to save my style sheet file, my external CSS file. So just with it blank for now, save as, go to the right folder, make sure it's the same folder that the web pages are in, even though we can't see them there. I know that's the folder that my web pages are in, and give it a sensible name. And it needs the suffix, it needs the file extension CSS. So let's save that, even though it's not got nothing in there at the moment. If I go and look at my folder now, yes, it's relative, it's next to my HTML documents, just like I want my images to be. Otherwise it makes my link to the CSS file from my HTML documents harder to make if it's not relative to them. So that's an important thing. I think my next job is to go and actually add some CSS to that file. So if I find it, I can start to type out my first bit of CSS. And the first thing I'm going to do is provide some formatting for anything in a HTML document that is wrapped with the P tag. So I just use that same letter for that tag, and then I use the braces, the curly brackets. And I open them next to the name, I close them a couple of lines further down, and then inside of that I set any of my styles that I want to apply to anything that is wrapped with the P tag. So the first one that I'm going to set is font hyphen family colon, and this is the name of a nice font, Angelus, wrapped in quotes there, and then I do a semicolon because I'm going to do another piece of formatting. Font size colon 20px for pixels, semicolon. Notice no quotes needed for that one. Next, font weight is going to be bold, so that's the sort of boldness of the font, semicolon, and that might just do for now. Notice no quotes again on the bold one, so there's slight inconsistencies in CSS, as there is in most languages. So I'm just going to save that now. I'm going to go back to my Yorkshire Mountains page and refresh it, F5. Nothing's happened, nothing that might be wrapped by the paragraph tag. It's actually that piece of text there has changed at all, and that's simply because I haven't linked this web page to my CSS file. So that's my next job. So the tag that I need to use in order to link to our external CSS file lives inside the head tag and is the link tag. And if we remember back to our lesson on HTML, the link tag is a tag that the examiner would like you to know about, so it's a good job that we're visiting it here. And it's a standalone tag, so it doesn't need closing with a / at any point, but it does need some properties setting. And the first property is called rel. I keep calling these properties, lots of people like to call them attributes, so I might use both terms, properties and attributes. The first attribute we're going to use is called rel, and that's short for relationship, and that's just telling this web page what the relationship for this web page is with the external file. And our external file is a style sheet, so we just say that's what it's for. And with the type attribute, type property, we give it a bit more detail about exactly what type of style sheet it is, a CSS file in this case. Finally, we use the href property to point towards our CSS file. So we've seen the href tag when we've been using, the href property when we've been using the a tag, our hyperlink tag, and you just either give a URL or a file name or file location in here. And because the Mountains site CSS file lives in the same folder as this HTML document, it's just the file name you need to put in, and you don't need to worry about any file locations or anything, so that's quite nice and easy. So a quick Control and S on this now, and I should hopefully see the text that is wrapped by the P tag change font and maybe go bold, because I've linked through to my CSS file using my link tag, and I've got a style set up for the P tag in my CSS file. So I've saved, and if I Alt Tab over to the web page now and refresh it, I should hopefully see this bit of text here, which is wrapped with a P tag, change style. Refresh, and it hasn't worked. So there's obviously a problem somewhere with my HTML. So if I go back to it and just inspect what I've done with my link tag, yes, there's an extra S in there which doesn't need to be there. So HTML and CSS are all about precision. So if I just get rid of that extra S, Control S, and then Alt Tab back to my web page, F5 to refresh, and this time my style has been applied. You can add lots of things to each style, so I could even do something with the colour, and the colour setting here is just called colour, nothing to do with font -colour, and I'm setting it to blue, and quotes around the blue wouldn't actually work in this case, which is interesting. But I've updated my style sheet here now. If I save that, and because my link is still in place, I should just be able to go straight to my web page and refresh, and yes, my text goes blue as well. So you can update styles and change them as you go along. Now the sister page to Yorkshire Mountains, if I go there and start to refresh things, the style hasn't been applied to the equivalent paragraph, and that's because if I look at the HTML for Derbyshire Mountains, I don't have my link in there. So I just need to pop it in there, and of course the best way to do that will be to copy and paste it from Yorkshire Mountains over to Derbyshire Mountains, Control and S on Derbyshire Mountains, refresh in the browser, and the style's been applied there as well. So any styles that I now apply or I put into my CSS file, my external CSS file, will apply to both web pages automatically. And that's one of the beauties of external CSS files. They're efficient and they provide consistency. You're likely to want to apply lots of styles to your web pages in a website, and these CSS files will typically have many more styles set up than the ones that we see here, and it could be running into the hundreds. I've just set up 2 now in here, both aimed at paragraph text, but both slightly different. Hence, they're different IDs, they're different classes, which are set after a dot for each. So the one that I've used already, the bold and blue style, is called p.bluebold, and just a normal Andalus font of 20 pixels in size is just called p.normal. And what that will do is allow me to apply some bold blue to some text, but also just some straight Andalus 20 pixel. So we'll see that's on both web pages. How's that done? Well, let's go and look at the HTML for it. Both bits of text, here is the guide to them, and the bit before it, are both using the paragraph tag, still the p tag, but now both have a attribute set for each, which is the class attribute, just saying which class to use, blue, bold, or normal. So that's how that works, and that's typically what you'll see is classes of different classes of the same tag. Now, the reason why CSS is called cascading style sheets leads us on nicely to a simplified version of those 2 styles that we just looked at. What I've done here is I've got rid of the p.normal style, and I've now just got a p style and a p.bluebold style. And if I go and look at my HTML, I'm only using p class equals bluebold and p, and not p class equals normal. And because the style for p is what I also want to use in my style for blue bold, with the addition of these 2 properties, because p.bluebold is almost like a child style of just p, it inherits these 2 pieces of style from p. So p.bluebold inherits all the styles from p, just above it there. And this is a cascading nature of this technology. These properties here cascade into this class here, because blue bold is a class of our p tag. So that's where it gets its name from, and that works quite nicely and just displays things in the way it did before. I was just playing around with a pink colour there, but I've changed it back to blue now. And it's a simplified bit of HTML in my main document and a simplified bit of CSS there as well. So, things that are important regarding CSS for your exam. Key things. Remember, it's called cascading style sheets. It's a style sheet language used for describing the look and formatting of a document written in a markup language. CSS can be part of a HTML document or stored as a separate file and linked to the document. Advantages of CSS. You're likely to get asked about those in the exam. Simpler and more readable HTML code is produced. Our HTML code has less formatting directly applied upon it, therefore it is simpler and more readable. That leads to faster development time and better consistency throughout websites. And we've got this idea of it being an easier conversion from one scheme to another. What do we mean by this? Well, it's the idea that an appropriate layout can be applied to the same content for different devices. So we might have the same data in web pages for all these types of device or web browser, yet we could easily apply different style sheets to that content to make it appear different and suitable for those devices and those users quite easily using cascading style sheets. And that's something you could investigate for yourself a little further as a bit of further reading. You could also, of course, use the thousands of resources on the web to investigate the thousands of different sort of settings you can make using CSS, such as this one to change the background color of a web page to make it look something absolutely disgusting like that, or like that. And a good thing to look up for some further reading as well might be how CSS interacts quite well with the div tag. If we remember rightly, the div tag is used to help position things on web pages, so it would be good to look into that as well. Hope you enjoyed that and you've fallen in love with CSS as well.